flying cow. Said the spoon to the fork as they lay, intertwined in the hay.
Greetings YouTube netizens. It's been a long while since I've returned to my roots and discussed gaming, anime, and Mendos, but considering recent events in the land of scorching Twitter, and Elon Musk's murky annexation of it, I believe it's time to dive into a topic a bit different than most. In this video, I will expose Sean McGuiness, aka that Godzilla guy, to be that Godzilla SJW in the hopes of waking up people to SJW doctrine with all things based in the light of truth with truth-flavored bias. So who or what is Sean McGuiness? He is known as that Godzilla guy, quote unquote, a photographic artist from the Redneck state of South Carolina and the creator of Twisted Kaiju Theater, which was an online Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, anime, and anything webcomic and photo album with Godzilla. It was very popular at one time, until it went through this whole legal thing, had to change its name, and everyone moved on to other sites. TKT included Kaiju Girls, otherwise known as Gujane Kug, which man babies fap over. Disgusting, and Michael Dougherty would agree that's disgusting. TKT's main character is Shingoji, the leader and webmaster of near Monster Island and its citizens. He had a relationship with a Republican parrot named Murugu, and he is actually a self-insert of Sean himself. The web series contains vulgar humor with its Ghidorah lemon sour marshmallow poop jokes, and is filled with social commentary which the creator coined as Godzillification. Basically interjecting plastic toys into art, to make a political point. Based on Sean's artwork, his political beliefs seem to land on the left of the political spectrum. He strongly believes in equality, environmentalism, open borders, marriage, tolerance, and police reformation.
Wait, what?
Leftists tend to want to change their surroundings for the greater good, while rightists tend to conform to their surroundings, in my political opinion. Sean seems to obviously mean well in the utilization of his talents and gifts, but my concerns come from the old proverb,
"The road to hell is paved with good intent."
So where is Sean misguided? On everything. Enter woke. Woke, quote unquote, is a bastardized adjective meaning alert to racializing prejudices and discriminations. A passive-aggressive way of saying enlightened or red-pilled.
Abortion is a woman's right. Her body is her own and no man has the right to legislate it.
I told you Godzilla is woke as the
Slumdog millionaire Vivek Ramaswamy explains in his lessons book and memoir, Woke Inc., going woke undermines competence and efficiency. Where merit is sacrificed, in order to appear modern and inclusive. For instance, Ben & Jerry made Colin Kaepernick ice cream, to appeal to blacks in America, and it sucked. Eddie's Godzilla 98 ice cream was better. And since 2015, Canada has become a frozen shithole.
They passed the friggin' easiest Canadian border to cross!
Because it's 2015.
In online media discussions, wokeness often leads to critics praising sucky video games and sucky movies, but mainstream audiences know better, for the most part. It's the old saying by an Amish-looking guy named Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers, get woke go broke. But we are still not done. Being woke can blind you to actual injustices in the world. LeBron James won't even condemn the big red gay known as China for genocide and slave labor, because of his Nike deal. At least Enes Kanter has the balls to do it. Speaking of balls, it's time to kick the black supremacist beehive that is the Black Lives Matter movement. You won't find this on their official website, but BLM's attitude and apparent manifesto is to disrupt the nuclear family structure, whether it's white and black families, because it's too Western, quote unquote. They must hate the MonsterVerse movies for ungay reasons. So unlike the bonds of friendship and family, which are mutually beneficial, BLM wants to make perpetual bonds between their own selves over ignorant or trivial things. Now whenever BLM is synthesized plus has its moment, protests can be pretty ugly disasters. Remember this equation, you'll know when you need it. The moment in question is whenever a thug is killed by police, just because they happen to be black. George Floyd in particular was a cruel piece of work, but BLM venerated him. They should at least advocate for the unborn. Thankfully Clarence Thomas has just saved more black lives than Black Lives Matter ever did. Oh shit. Well, this is par for the course. Welcome back. Now let's move on to Sean's other misguidedness. We'll be looking in depth in comparing both the Vic Mignogna and Bill Cosby
Ah shit, it's Vic Mignogna.
Excuse me for a 1 second. Now look, I don't particularly like Vic Mignogna. I never met the guy. He looks like an Italian lesbian with very female moves. And literally every sad anime death since the start of his career is Vic's fault. But what, am I supposed to hate him because he ate a jelly bean with Monica Real's name on it? Because he played with Jamie Marker's hair that one time and she didn't have a problem with it until she pretended to be offended by it in 2019. Because he took the spotlight from Monica in So Bassa Reservoir Chronicles despite that her character is asleep for most of the screen time. Because plot. Because he thumps the Bible? Or because he refused to sign a fangirl's yaoi fan art? Or maybe you hate him because he's allegedly too kissy and gives people the creeps like Chris Patton and Damon Mills. But have you ever actually looked at the allegations with the slightest amount of scrutiny? Seems to me that the people of YouTube are more awake on this retardedness than the woke retards on Twitter and Anime News Network. On to the comparison. As you can see, following the new canonized Broly movie of 2019, Mexican drama queen Mars Girl started a smear campaign against Vic Mignogna, accusing him of sexual harassisms. Even though she never met him, neither does she know him. Monica Real amplified Mars Girl's campaign, and it led to Funimation conducting an official investigation, quote unquote. They terminated Vic's employment, however, he was never legally prosecuted. Since 2019, there's no warrant for his arrest. Either Funimation is choosing not to report Vic's quote-unquote misconduct to the police, or their official investigation, quote-unquote, is fabricated evidence. Either of which are actual criminal offenses. Vic later on received funds from drunken Irish lawyer Nick Recator to sue his accusers for defamation, but as of 2022 the case was dismissed due to no precedent of defamation by Twitter. Well, on top of Ty Beard turning in a document a day past its due, which caused the entire TCPA appeal to be dismissed, because Texas is a retarded state, and they are notorious for executing the retarded. Since Vic was the plaintiff, he has $500,000 in legal fees, but that's pocket change. Nick Recator has him covered, so don't worry about it. Nowadays, Funimation has lost its credibility except for Chuck Huber and Stephanie Nadolny. Chris Sabat's infamous casting couch and Dragon Ball Z yaoi fanfiction got leaked, and Funimation got bought out by Sony and Crunchyroll, and they won't be gerbiling anytime soon. Meanwhile, Vic has a much larger following of anime fans for better or worse, and is a dubbing director for Anime Mortsura's own dubbing studio. As for Bill Cosby, he has had allegations against him since the 1960s, but eventually, after the police arrested him for actual sexual misconduct, not for being black, he was found guilty and sent to prison. His conviction has only been vacated as of now. Evidence for his misconduct is still in the pudding. The difference between the two is due process. Defendants are innocent until they are proven guilty in a court of law. In the context of woke, cancel culture undermines due process. It asserts that anyone accused is automatically guilty by virtue of people's feelings, aka democracy. And as a wise sultan once said,
because democracy basically means government by the people, of the people, for the people. But the people are retarded.
As you probably noticed, these patterns are getting worse in nature. In regards to policing, gay Vietnamese journalist Andy Ngo was in Portland, Oregon, where he was assaulted by Antifa for insulting their minds by being there, as well as being gay. The police did nothing, because the mayor told them to stand down, and might as well have let Antifa burn the city to the ground. The point being that the woke idea of defunding police means an increase in crime. Some cops can be assholes for sure, but most of them are not. Just search good cop on YouTube. Thankfully Andy No is doing well, that gay man. Antifa's history is an interesting one. Beloved chubby Brit Winston Churchill supposedly said after the Second Great War with fascist Italy, the fascists of the future will call themselves anti-fascists. Even if he didn't say that, he could not be any more right. Just look at Mussolini's black shirts back then, and look at Antifa now. They embrace a bad essence. And this brings us to the final most retarded pattern in wokeness, Trump derangement syndrome. Now look, I don't even vote. My stance is that of deceased, stand-up comedian George Carlin. If you vote, then prepare to face the consequences of your vote's screw-ups. To the people who voted for Joe Biden to get Donald Trump out of office, I say this. You've told people, since 2016, that Orange Man was the worst thing to happen to America, that his win against the so-called elites was a white lash against a progressing country that just elected a black president, that the world would be better off without Orange Man in it. Now look what's happened. In your attempt to appear virtuous, the world is hardly at peace. Sleepy Joe has officially become the worst president in US history for his disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal. He ordered troops out first, which is what led to the Taliban taking over. And because of Joe's weakness, Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine for Azov Nazis and broken promises on NATO's part. And just recently North Korea test-fired missiles over Japan, and they had to duck and cover. Was it all worth it? Don't know. Sigh. That's better. Anyways, I still love Twisted Kaiju Theater for the nostalgia and hilarity of it. Shame that Sean got rid of it all, sad. I just wish Sean to be more self-aware of his ideology, and I hope to have swayed anyone's opinion. This was a huge pill for me to swallow. That's all for now, good night. We'll be looking in depth in comparing both the Vic Mayoral and Bill Cosby situations, and how they were originally invented.
Ah shit, it's Vic Mignogna.
Is this guy supposed to be Alfred?
This is how all our stories have been passed down. Limericks sung by the light of the fire, till there's nothing to say.
Greetings everyone. Since I have covered the MonsterVerse and Reiwa Godzilla movies, and lightly touched on the Showa era, it's about time that I cover the Millennium era. The Heisei era will have its coverage in time, but for now, this video will rate the top 6 movies of the Millennium Godzilla series from 1999 to 2004. Before we start the countdown, an important history lesson is in order, otherwise you will be misled by the creatures of Potenia, and what might be their pinnacle of YouTube video essays being no less bloated and bland than the movies being covered.
Because of the Roland Emmerich Godzilla film had created a burning vendetta in Toho, these Godzilla films didn't do as well as the previous era, as its existence was out of spite. The life was gone for Godzilla. There was nothing new coming out. It was the same movies, a different time. When the foundation for a project are this obviously cynical, don't be surprised when the walls fall apart. As these 6 Godzilla movies fail to inspire confidence or success in the franchise.
God, you're pretentious, and you delude yourself by thinking you're some great writer even though you're terrible.
I'd be lying if I said their video didn't inspire me to make this video, so please read history. Anyways, the Godzilla franchise was supposed to end with Godzilla vs. Destroyer in 1995, but before that, Toho signed a deal with TriStar to let them make a Godzilla movie. It was supposed to come out in 1994, but it was pushed back to 1998, which means that the Godzilla franchise did not end in 1995, even if Godzilla died. When 1998 happened, TriStar's Godzilla was released to mixed reception. On one hand you had, and still have people praising it for being fun and action-packed, and on the other hand you had, and still have people pissing on it for turning Godzilla into a joke, quote unquote. This forced Toho's hand into making Godzilla movies again into the 21st century, but this time, there was no roadmap. There was no plan for continuity, much like Disney Star Wars. Very much like the Reiwa era, Toho threw an idea at the wall, and saw what stuck and what didn't. Furthermore, each Millennium entry was essentially its own reboot and or sequel to the original Godzilla movie, with little altercations to the storyline, and or retcons. Also, it's important to note that the Millennium era is not an extension of the Heisei era by virtue of having the same creative heads. By that logic, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull would be considered an extension of the Indiana Jones trilogy by virtue of having Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. So now that we've laid out these ground rules, let's get into the top 6 Millennium Godzilla movies. Number 6, Godzilla Final Wars. GFW is by far the worst of these movies for the following reasons. Putting Godzilla on ice for most of the movie's screen time when this is supposed to be the franchise's 50th anniversary. This is a larger problem than 2014, because reboots are a dime a dozen, and at least Godzilla was in Always Sunset on 3rd Street between 2004 and 2014. Half-centennials are one of a kind, and come every 50 years. Way to drop the ball, Toho, you silly company. While Godzilla's on ice, the movie celebrates everything metal around him, be it the other kaiju, the actors who appeared in previous Godzilla movies, lore and so on. But overall the foundational issue is the story. It doesn't make sense. To describe the plot would be like trying to explain quantum physics in 5 minutes, but basically Godzilla battles the Atragon in Antarctica, and gets frozen, like in Raids again. And then humanity puts aside their differences and bands together, to fight other monsters via a stock footage montage. While that's happening, meta-humans and aliens called mutants emerge from all over the universe due to a cosmic shift in the gay. Kind of like how Airbenders did in Legend of Korra Book 3, or infamously how Rey emerged to counter Kylo Ren in Disney Star Wars. Suddenly monsters genetically modified to be gay under the control of Exilians attack civilization, to harvest human mitochondria, so Earthlings thaw out Godzilla to stop them. Godzilla holds a grudge against humanity for an onontitic fire, but then Meniere jumps into the story, to convince Godzilla to forgive mankind. Which he seems to do, and they all swim into the sunset. What a wet chunky fart. The cast of human characters is bloated, so here's only 3 major characters, to spare you lot the trouble. Dowd Gordon, played by Dom Fry, is hands down the best character in this movie. He has a rocking mustache and impressive sword fighting skills. At a young age, he froze Godzilla, and he would do it again. What a badass. Ozorki is a mutant human hybrid looking for purpose in life, which he does find in religion during the end credits. By the end of the movie, he unlocks the full potential of the gay and defeats the Exilian leader in Mortal Kombat, and to help Godzilla defeat Monster X, he gives the gay to Godzilla, turning him gay? Well, something similar happens to Rey in Rise of Skywalker. Wow, how much more derivative can this get? X is an Exilian in disguise, and is dashingly portrayed by Kazuki Kitamura, no homo. His plan is to harvest human mitochondria, which makes him see humanity as cows, but his method is questionable. Instead of rounding up humans, he commands his forces to exterminate them and their civilization. X, why are you so retarded? Where did you learn to harvest? On a farm? James Rolfe did say GFW is for the most part like a remake of Destroy All Monsters, which is retarded. Destroy All Monsters has better writing, and back in the day, it was a big deal, because Toho wanted to see so many of their famous Showa monsters thrown together into one movie. GFW has a lot of monsters, but most of them are not given the proper character development. For example, Rodan in GFW barely resembles a character, unlike Rodan in the Showa movies. Showa Rodan as we know him is supposedly the offspring of the 2 Rodans that died at the end of their first movie, when humans triggered the eruption that killed them. This led him to grow up hating mankind. In Ghidorah the three-headed monster, Mothra tries to convince him and Godzilla to stop fighting among themselves and instead fight Ghidorah or he will destroy the earth and humanity with it, but they say nah. They later see Mothra getting wrecked by Ghidorah and are like screw it, we've got to help, and they work together to defeat Ghidorah and save the earth and humankind for once.
But that trope is so overdone.
Oh, just piss off. Pardon me. Anyway, Rodan and Godzilla fought Ghidorah again in Invasion of the Astro Monster and we were led to believe they died fighting him. Godzilla survived as he was in the next Showa film, but Destroy All Monsters later confirmed that Rodan lived. At this point in Rodan's life, he became a father figure to Baragon. They appeared at Mount Fuji to help kill Ghidorah once and for all, and they all lived happily ever after eating dolphins. Most of the monsters in GFW are nothing special, but I'll explain further those of interest. Godzilla is called Final Goji. He has almond-shaped eyes making him look like an Asian. As previously said, he's frozen for most of the movie. There is a male equivalent of the word Mary Sue and it's Gary Stew, and Final Goji is a Gary Stew, until he fights Monster X. Fans say Final Goji is actually Godzilla Jr. from the Heisei movies, which is retarded, because those movies aren't in the same continuity. And they also say Final Goji is the most powerful Godzilla to date, even more powerful than Heisei Godzilla, but SpongeBob can defeat both of them, because he's always ready.
Shut up, stop commenting things that have nothing to do with this video. Also, Heisei Godzilla can actually beat SpongeBob SquarePants.
And there is no way in Sam's 9 Circles of Hell that Final Goji is the father of Meniere, so why does he listen to him at the end? He was frozen in ice, and there are no other Godzillas in the movie. Even though this applies to Meniere in the Showa era, is Meniere even a member of Godzilla's species? If so, can Godzilla change size, since Meniere does it in GFW? Even though Meniere only did that because he was in a child's dream? Don't know. Zilla is the only monster in the movie all rendered in CGI. He's called a tuna head by X, which suggests he's a pescatarian, but we see him hunting and eating Australians when he attacks Sydney. In the latter half of his screen time we hear the song We Are All to Blame by Psalm 41, but it's played when Godzilla tail whips him into the opera house and fries him. Despicable. Mothra and Gigan have a history. They both fought in the past and fight again in the movie. Gigan in particular has a cool awakening scene, and after Godzilla blows his head off, he gets a cooler grade like Ash in Evil Dead. Mothra is set on fire, but she defeats Gigan while immolating. However, she flies back to her island, unscorched during the end credits. When King Caesar was introduced into Godzilla canon in the Showa era, he was Godzilla's ally against Mechagodzilla and the Guardian of Okinawa, so why is he an enemy and a destroyer in Final Wars? Did the Exilians really turn him gay? Don't know. He also doesn't have his reflective eye prism ability, which is a trademark of the character. Hashtag not my King Caesar. Ghidorah hasn't been in a movie since 1971, and in Final Wars he is done dirty. He's on screen for like 15 seconds, which is far less than any monster in the MonsterVerse. He even appears during the end credits, but his screen time there is soiled by credits in the foreground. And he's killed along with Ebirah by Godzilla, who also got screwed over. So let me guess, rabid Final Wars fans will say that it's not just about the fights, while those are hugely important and the reason people bought tickets to come see these fights like a good boxing match. It's all about the key ingredient to a Godzilla movie, the heart and spirit about mankind's relationship with nature, and what happens when that relationship is broken, which goes back to the 1954 Godzilla movie. And all that happy horse shit. But guess what, you presumptuous dullards? Final Wars' story is just sludge, insidious sludge dripping onto the page. And don't give me the excuse that it's supposed to be bad. Thankfully Ghidorah's mistreatment was rectified in the recently released short film, which also celebrated Godzilla vs. Ghidorah's 50th anniversary. Good to know that Ghidorah got a good half centennial. Hands down, Monster X is the best monster in the movie. Since GFW is his debut movie, he is the most memorable. He's on par on Final Godzilla in strength and power, which makes you think, why didn't the Exilians start their conquering of Earth with him? Anyways, his special abilities consist of telekinesis and golden beams he shoots from his eyes. He teams up with Gigan against Godzilla, which makes sense as they're both from space. And the most cool thing Monster X can do is transform into Kaiser Ghidorah. He would have defeated Final Godzilla had he not been given the Gay, meaning the Kaiser Ghidorah is the most powerful being to have ever walked the planet Earth in a Godzilla movie, more powerful than Augur and Destroyer. So the plot and characters are ridiculous, the respect for Godzilla is trash, but Final Wars' world building is broken all thanks to one scene. There is a scene wherein a fat Canadian kid is playing with toys of various Godzilla kaiju, and casts a turtle into his fireplace, which is a jab at Gamera. Despicable. It's meant to be Bandai product placement, but why is this a storytelling problem? It's surely no more harmful than Pacific Rim making merchandise out of mass murdering monsters, right? Well, not really. The various kaiju consist of not only monsters that appear in the movie like McGuiness, but other kaiju like Biollante, Space Godzilla, Mecha King Ghidorah, Mecha Godzilla 2, Kiryu, and so on. We are told in the stock footage montage that humanity banded together and fought off monsters. Since most of the monsters I mentioned earlier are canonically Godzilla clones, that implies there were other Godzillas in the movie, but no other Godzilla is mentioned. So where did these monsters come from? Don't know. Number 5, Godzilla vs McGuiness. And yes, it's pronounced McGuiness. Here's proof.
McGuiness. McGuiness.
It's not Megagyrus. James Rolfe, you illiterate.
Godzilla vs. Megagyrus. Megagyrus. So Megagyrus.
As a wise German once said, he who does not know foreign languages knows nothing of his own. Anyways, the idea of Godzilla fighting a female insectoid and her swarm was actually ripped off of the scrapped sequel to Godzilla 98, which never happened. One could argue that Toho has a history of ripping off concepts from others' Godzilla media, be it fan fiction or canonical material not fully realized. Eventually this idea would be realized in TriStar's animated Godzilla series. While ideas are cheap, the executed story of GXM is a cluttered mess. There are many retcons when seeing this as a sequel to the first Godzilla movie. Godzilla attacks Tokyo in 1954, but no oxygen destroyer is mentioned nor ever used, meaning that Serizawa vanished from existence for no reason. In 1966, Godzilla attacks a nuclear power plant because he wants to eat nuclear energy. So Japan is convinced by a fancy hat-wearing lady in parliament to try new means of energy, so there's a theme of renewable energy, but although nuclear power is not a renewable energy, it is still recyclable. Plasma energy generating attracts Godzilla in 1996, resulting in it being banned. But in 2001, Godzilla senses plasma energy still being made. A new means of combating Godzilla is created called the Dimensional Tide, but a test firing accidentally sends a prehistoric dragonfly to the present, which leads to McGuiness. So the move is all about trying new methods to create energy, methods to defeat Godzilla, but just because something's new, it's not automatically good. Case in point, the Dimensional Tide. Supposedly it creates black holes and fires them at enemies, but it really creates wormholes, which are completely different. Wormholes create a passage between 2 points in the space-time continuum. For example, a gate connecting modern-day Tokyo, Japan to ancient Europe would be a wormhole. Black holes are made up of dark matter and are so dense that they suck up and distort light. In theory, just one black hole the size of a nickel would rip planet Earth apart, taking everyone living on it with it. In short, you'll die. But don't take my word for it, Dr. Alan Grant thinks so too.
Put a black hole near something and immediately it starts ripping it apart.
There's a star in there, could just as easily be our sun, and it is being pulled apart by a black hole.
A black hole weighs as much as a massive star, but it's crammed into an area smaller than a pea. A black hole is gravity gone mad. Nothing can ever escape.
This is all Superman's fault.
You'd think they would consult Neil deGrasse Tyson. In the end, it fails to defeat Godzilla, so what was the point? So what about the characters? Well, our strong female protagonist Kiriko hates Godzilla. She seeks to avenge her dead comrades since his attack in 1996, but we aren't shown much camaraderie beforehand, so who cares? Much like Haruo Sakaki, but as a woman. In one scene, she climbs onto Godzilla, which is innovative, but then you remember children went inside Gamera to exterminate a parasite. She apparently has a love interest in Hajime Kudo, but she really doesn't. Throughout the movie, she looks like an evil lesbian. Much like Rita Repulsa from Power Rangers. Hajime Kudo works with gadgets, and is hired to work on the dimensional tide, though he should at least know the difference between a black hole and a wormhole. While he's somewhat retarded, he's more likable than Kiriko due to his commitment to work. He got injured during MegaGearS's first flight, but that doesn't stop him from doing his job. June being a child character makes him a Kenny, a child character that we see in just about every monster movie, but he's in actuality an inoffensive Kenny. Toy Show from Gamera in 1965 is a Kenny who has calonophilia. A fetish for turtles, I kid you not. On top of that, he is retarded. He puts himself in harm's way just to get close to Gamera, that you have to wonder why he isn't on a leash. Eiichiro from Godzilla's Revenge is a Kenny who is annoying sometimes, but Godzilla's son Meniere inspires him to man up, mustering courage to outwit his kidnappers when his mother couldn't be there to protect him, and beating up his schoolyard bullies, and earning their respect. Side note, the term Kenny was coined by Brandon Tenold, aka Earth Baragon, when he reviewed the Gamera movies. I hope his music videos are still online. As for June, he is a bug collector who sees the test firing, but is let off the hook by Kiriko, as opposed to her locking him in a cellar. He unknowingly takes the egg containing MegaGearS home, which later on hatches, and later on he helps the G-Graspers identify Meganulon. All in all, he's harmless. Lastly, we'll discuss the kaiju. Godzilla is either called Mirai Goji or Gira Goji. The suit portraying him is the same suit from Godzilla 2000, but it's strangely used to recreate shots from 1954. I suppose if Toho used stock footage, people would call that lazy. Since Godzilla is overall supposedly a metaphor for the faults of nuclear energy, does this mean plasma energy is just as bad as nuclear energy? Don't know. In the movie, Godzilla does an extraordinary jump attack on MegaGearS, which is weird, even by Showa movie standards. Later Showa movies, to be precise, where he flew, did a drop tail Sparta kick, and became magnetized. And then there's MegaGearS. Her Meganulon design is an upgrade from the 1956 film Rodan. Does this mean that Rodan fits in this continuity? Don't know. Even though she's based on the Queen Bee, in TriStar's scrapped sequel, she can emote, which gives her personality or pathos. But the pathos is one of ravishment, which is disturbing. She can absorb her enemy's energy and use it against them by penetrating them, and this ability is even used in the Atari video games. She's super fast, and can create high-frequency waves. Her defeat follows when Godzilla castrates her stinger, and she gets Me Too'd. Though during her first flight, her strings are visible, which is lazy. Number 4, Godzilla Tokyo SOS. Kiryu shills Alyssa Goji Geek and Donald Fimbulwinter wax fancy about the Kiryu saga representing a turning point in the franchise. While both Against Mechagodzilla and Tokyo SOS are better than Final Wars and versus MegaGearS, each of them have major flaws. Tokyo SOS being worse than its predecessor. Before Tokyo SOS, the saga consisted of only the original Godzilla movie and Against Mechagodzilla. Tokyo SOS then decided to add more Showa-era films to the storyline, like Mothra, Space Amoeba, War of the Gargantuas, and so on, which makes things extremely complicated if you were to watch the Kiryu saga in chronological order. Questions rise such as, how does Tokyo keep getting rebuilt after every demolition? Is Tokyo even habitable despite Shodaigoji's radiation fallout? Where has Mothra been, and why hasn't she protected Japan before? Since Gorosaurus is in this continuity, does that mean King Kong is in this continuity? Don't know. I'm not even going to touch on the characters in this movie, because writing Akane out of Tokyo SOS was really lame, considering her character writing, and the connection that she developed with Kiryu. The two of them were literally the heart of the previous film. To wrap up Tokyo SOS, let's discuss the kaiju. Godzilla is called Kiryu Goji, and the suit depicting him is used in both movies. Fans would agree that Kiryu Goji is one of the weakest iterations of Godzilla, but they would also agree that he has a cool scar on his chest from the last movie. Despite being one of the weakest, even with the combined effort of Mothra's larvae and Kiryu, he is still alive at the end of the movie. Just somewhere on the ocean floor wrapped in silk. While Mothra's imago design is a cool upgrade from her earlier Showa and Heisei designs, her role in the Kiryu saga raises the question why didn't she appear in the previous film if she objects to using Shodaigoji's bones to create Kiryu? Either she or the Shobijin are retarded, your pick. Her larvae put up a good fight against Godzilla, but just before Godzilla picks them off with his atomic breath, Mothra sacrifices herself so they can carry on. #Mothra innocent. On his own, Kiryu is the best kaiju in the saga. He is the coolest looking Mecha Godzilla, Goji Fan 1993 said so. His list of cool abilities consists of his absolute zero cannon via his chest, a maser cannon beam via his mouth, maser blades and spiral claws, and he can fly. I do wish he was playable in both the GameCube and Xbox versions of Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee. Kiryu has one weakness. Since he was created from Shodaigoji's skeleton, his spirit can awaken and take over his circuitry. But that's another major issue. At the end of Kiryu's story, he says goodbye to his pilot Yoshito, when it should have been Akane. Regardless, would Shodaigoji really say that?
Get off my island!
Number 3, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. Obviously it's the better half of the Kiryu saga for its character writing. It might as well have the best character writing in any Godzilla movie, but what holds it back from being the best written Godzilla movie is a huge plot hole. Also side note, baseball player Hideki Matsui has the nickname Godzilla, and makes a cameo in the movie. So what's the plot hole? As previously stated, the story is a direct continuation of 1954, while incorporating other Showa movies. This includes the oxygen destroyer used to kill Shodaigoji, and how it works according to Serizawa. In 1954, Shodaigoji completely disintegrates. Flesh, bones, everything. But in Against Mechagodzilla, the bones are still intact. That's the contradiction. That shouldn't happen. Now that we've noticed this piece of inconsistent writing, the next step would be to assess its impact. Since Kiryu's existence depends on the bones not disintegrating, this in turn makes Dr. Serizawa a liar. He explicitly stated that the oxygen destroyer disintegrates everything about its victims. Turns out he was wrong. Now, technically this plot hole is a retcon, but a retcon can make sense. For example, in Dragon Ball Z, Vegeta and Goku separated from Vegito inside of Buu, when it was stated that Potara fusion was permanent. It may have been due to bad air in Buu, but Dragon Ball Super then elaborated that Potara fusion is only permanent between Kais, not mortals. Though Super has a myriad of issues. But what if there was a way to fix this issue? The solution is simple. Have the skeleton of a completely different Godzilla be found with its own backstory and motivation. Say, a Godzilla that was killed by Kiryu Goji, and with its new robotic body it can exact revenge, but Akane would convince him to let Kiryu Goji go when he's beaten. Annoyingly typical, but it's something. Other than that, everything else about the writing is good. Especially the character writing for Akane Yashino. Since Against Mechagodzilla and vs Megaguirus were written by the same person, Wata Yumimura, Akane, and Kiriko have similar backgrounds, but you can definitely tell that the writer looked back on his script for vs Megaguirus and made improvements. That's passion for storytelling. But how he let that huge plot hole slip through is a mystery. Akane Yashino is by far the best female protagonist in the Godzilla franchise. Better than Miki Segusa, better than Emi Koyamoni, better than the Mary Tsukayoko and Patterson, better than all the women in the MonsterVerse, and definitely better than Mekamino, Blue Nova. Her story begins as a rookie haunted by the memory of a mistake that got her comrades killed, and living with the survivor's guilt. Ignoring Tokyo SOS, this totally makes sense as she and the Japanese Self-Defense Force haven't fought Godzilla since the 1950s, and her fear causes her to screw up. And bearing the blame while living must have been hard on her self-esteem. As an archetypical outcast, she prefers solitude, but when given the chance to pilot Kiryu, she works to redeem herself in a training montage akin to Disney's Mulan. The good one, not the communist one. Even though she prefers to be alone and doesn't value herself, Akane still values other people, like when one of her friends stands up for her when picked on by Susumu, and he picks on her friend, he gets his ass handed to him. When Sarah befriends Akane, she reminds her that her life has value. Through hard work and dedication, her team welcomes her back to the beloved core, and she gains her own redemption. She earned all these attributes. And throughout her story, she forms a camaraderie with Kiryu, letting him know that regardless of his mistakes like losing control, his life has value as much as hers. Charming, but you can't help but think it's weird considering Shodai Goji's history with women.
Get in my belly! Come on! You're lucky, wee man! Ah!
There is an outdated idea in looking at how characters should be composed, a want and a need. Wants are primal animal instincts, things everyone relates to like power, money, status, while needs are what the hero must fulfill within himself in order to have a better life. This idea is outdated because it's just another fancy way of saying character arcs. And it can be used to justify bad character writing like Jake Skywalker and a B from The Last of Us 2, so don't use it. Regardless, Akane's want and need are personified in Susumu and Sarah. Susumu Hayama blames Akane for his brother's death, and thus looks down on her in low status, but after she saves his life and everyone else around him accepts her, he eventually comes around and forgives her, restoring her status among the beloved core. Now I wish he were Kiryu's pilot in Tokyo SOS, that would have been cool. Sarah Uhura is a minor protagonist, but her childlike view on the value of life serves to motivate Akane, fulfilling her need of self-esteem. Sarah also carries a pot of grass to cope with her sensitivity to life and death caused by her mother's death, so we know where she's coming from. So Akane gets to have both her want and need while remaining consistent. That's a good character arc in my book. What's really interesting to note is that this movie has Godzilla and Mechagodzilla alone considering the other movies that have them. In the past, 1974's Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla co-starred Anguirus and King Caesar. Its sequel Terror of Mechagodzilla included Titanosaurus. The Heisei movie Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 had Rodan and Baby Godzilla, and yes I know Baby Godzilla is technically a Godzilla, but I'm counting him as a separate character. So here, without any other monster to intervene, we see what would happen if Godzilla and Mechagodzilla fought alone. Obviously Mechagodzilla would win. But in the future, Tokyo SOS and Godzilla vs. Khan would obviously have another monster join the fray, and City on the Edge of Battle doesn't count, because that was Godzilla fighting Mechagodzilla as a bunch of buildings, because the humans and aliens in that movie were too retarded not to reactivate him. Against Mechagodzilla also has its share of flaws. Sometimes the monster action can be slow. In the first fight, Godzilla just stands there getting hit with projectiles, almost as if the guy in the suit left to go get a cup of coffee and left the suit standing there. The second fight has the two bump into each other, and the shot drags out for like a minute, almost as if Zack Snyder was filming, just to bloat Godzilla and Kiryu's screen time. Not to mention this line. Pain. But if I recall correctly, there's a scene with a Japanese self-defense force soldier comforting a child after Godzilla's first attack in the beginning, giving him a fist bump. That scene has more patriotism than the entire screen time of Shin Godzilla. And I just found out Wata Yumimura passed away on August 26, 2021 from multiple system atrophy. Please, pay your respect. Now let's move on. Number 2, GMK. At this point you know what number 1 will be, but for now let's focus on number 2. The full title is, As Long as a Light Novel's title, and it rolls off your tongue, Godzilla, Mothra and King Ghidorah, giant monsters all out attack. Just to be clear, while I think the MonsterVerse movies suck for their gayness, while I'm apathetic towards Godzilla 98 for its asexuality, I have no sympathy for Toho purists. They want Godzilla to remain an allegory for nuclear holocaust no matter what, and want to drill into people's heads that nukes are bad and should be sent into space like in Superman for the quest for peace. Well, here's a Toho Godzilla movie that turned Godzilla from an allegory for nuclear holocaust into a supernatural beast to wreak havoc on Japan for wanting to forget its past. If you think it doesn't matter if the film is really good, the soul of Godzilla quote unquote just isn't there, you are retarded. I don't know what else to say. It was certainly a risk to replace Godzilla's radioactive element with something mystical, and the risk paid off. GMK is considered by many fans to be the highlight of the Millennium movies, and it deserves that reputation. Before we go into the different take on the monsters, we should talk about the human characters, because they play a vital role in the story just as the monsters. Yuri Tachibana is portrayed by Chiharu Niyama, who is leading actress hot, since she used to be a gravure idol. Yuri's character arc may not be as compelling as Akone's, but it's still good. She starts out as a fake news reporter desperate for clicks, but over the course of events, she comes around to using her platform to tell the nation of Japan that they need to remember the past, warts and all, for the greater good.
Shut it!
With her role in the story being so vital, her being susceptible to injury really sets the stakes. Her father Taizo is a step up from the typical soldier characters in monster movies. He's a badass. When Godzilla blasts soldiers away, he doesn't falter in the face of certain defeat. And most badass of all is he's brave enough to let Godzilla swallow him inside a submarine, and is still able to defeat him from the inside. Very much like Kratos, when he fought Kronos in God of War 3. Hirotoshi Isayama, no relation to Hajime Isayama, is the wise old man in many timeless stories, like Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars, or best yet, the prophets in the Bible. In the story, he serves as Yuri's guide, and warns her of the coming threat known as Godzilla, all because he's concerned for the state of Japan and the Japanese people. His words fall on deaf ears and he's thrown in jail, just like any prominent prophet with a vital message, yet the people don't want to hear it due to their stiff-neckedness. But then Baragon goes to jail in order to bail him out, or rather break him out of jail, so he can later break the ice holding Ghidorah. GMK's take on Godzilla, called Sokogeki Goji, is absolutely savage. He demolishes everything in his wake, nuking civilians, killing Baragon, Mothra, and King Ghidorah one by one. He has blank white eyes which can give anyone the creeps, and he's reminiscent of Shodai Goji. As opposed to being a larger than usual dinosaur irradiated by a nuke, nor an already big sea-dwelling creature driven out by hydrogen bomb tests, Sokogeki Goji is made up of souls of World War II soldiers, be they Japanese, American, British, or Chinese. These souls want to wipe Japan off the map, because modern Japan wants to forget its past atrocities, be they genocide, Unit 731, or comfort women. Now to put this into American perspective, imagine a Godzilla made up of Union and Confederate soldiers attacking modern United States, because it wants to forget about the bloody Civil War, and how horrifically slaves were treated. Similarly, fans of the anime Avenger like to think the protagonist Layla Ashley is a metaphorical incarnation quote-unquote of the souls of Lunarian refugees seeking revenge on a Martian dictator for blowing them up, a ghost from the past with unfinished business to solve, so she couldn't be free until she killed Hulk, but that makes no sense, because she was born on the moon before that happened, and she was on that ship as a child. Overall, this iteration of Godzilla is as non-G14 and Shin Godzilla as you can possibly get, which is exactly how Toho needed to go when they tried to beat Hollywood back in 2016 and failed hideously. Obviously don't be Hollywood nowadays. Rather, go unconventional, untraditional, but still stay essentially Godzilla. This is truly the destroyer of worlds that Oppenheimer described in the Godzilla 2014 Comic-Con teaser trailer all those years ago, or prophesied since 1965. Baragon makes a good comeback after not being on screen since 1968, though his name being in the title would have made it longer than necessary. Hey Legrandzilla, I know you're watching. If I hear you fapping to Baragon, I swear I'll call the police, so don't even think of touching that hand lotion. Anyways, there's a land, sea, and sky motif with the Guardian Monster trio, and Baragon is called the Guardian Monster of Earth. Makes sense since he can use dig. Unlike his Showa iterations, Baragon doesn't have any fire abilities. He could have still had his fire abilities, since lava is philosophically a cross between fire and earth as shown in Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra. But if he's not going to have them, why does he still have his glow-in-the-dark horn? Don't know. For his small size, he puts up a good effort against Godzilla despite that he dies. Behind the scenes, Baragon is portrayed by Rie Ota. Her historical significance is being the first female suit actor in a Godzilla movie, though first in all of Tokusatsu, being Yumi Kameyama in Gamera Guardian of the Universe as Gauss. When filming Baragon, Rie made the cutest roaring noises on set. Just listen.
I'm going to jail!
GMK detractors would tell you that Mothra and Ghidorah were just cynically shoehorned into the film by Toho to make more money at the box office, and they don't serve the story at all. That's just silly. Even if Mothra has the largest fan base outside of Godzilla, she serves the story as an opposer to Godzilla's rampage. She serves as the guardian monster of water and the sea, which kind of makes sense, since her design is based on an aquatic moth. Unlike her past iterations, she doesn't have Shobijin, but there is a scene where two identical women walk out and see Mothra overhead, but that's an Easter egg at best. And she can fire poison stings from her abdomen like a barrage of bullets, which are little sword-like weapons, which would be later used in the Atari games. The final kaiju in the Guardian Monster trio is King Ghidorah. He's the guardian monster of the sky, which kind of makes sense, since Ghidorah is canonically an alien denizen from space. Perhaps in an ancient time he fell right out of the sky, and instead of demolishing planet Earth, he called it his home, and agreed to be a guardian monster alongside Baragon and Mothra. Obviously that's not mentioned in the movie. GMK's soundtrack is incredible. Each monster has an amazing theme song, and Ghidorah's theme song is epic. Unlike previous iterations, Ghidorah is made a hero opposing Godzilla, when it was the other way around. This change of character was enough to make Blue Nova say GMK sucks. I shit you not.
GMK. This disrespects King Ghidorah, so we're gonna give this one a D.
In the movie, Yuri opens a book and sees illustrations of the guardian monsters. Ghidorah is illustrated having 4 legs, so was he supposed to be a quadruped? Don't know. Just about everyone knows Varen was supposed to be in the movie, but they may or may not know that, while the suit for Varen was being made, Toho decided to scrap Varen from the movie in favor of Ghidorah. The suit designer for Yuki Shinoda really liked Varen, and so he compensated by sculpting Varen's facial fins into each one of Ghidorah's heads. Varen did nothing wrong. It's pretty much common knowledge at this point that Anguirus and Varen were going to fight Godzilla alongside Baragon. But the motif was initially fire, ice, and wind. Baragon was going to have his trademark fire abilities, and McGuiness was going to have ice abilities to complement Baragon's, and Varen was going to control the air and fly like an airbender. And to be honest, Toho could have had Mothra and King Ghidorah without getting rid of McGuiness and Varen. You can have the original fire, ice, and wind guardian monsters, keep Mothra the guardian monster of water, and have King Ghidorah be the guardian monster of lightning, under the precept that water and ice are separate elements as well as fire, and lightning as shown in Pokemon. If anyone says that's too many monsters like Spider-Man 3 having too many villains, remind them that Destroy All Monsters had 11 kaiju and no one complained. And if they say it wasn't in the budget, tell them that going over budget wouldn't have stopped Toho from making 3 more movies. The monster action in GMK is regarded as top tier. Though it ranges from great and spectacular as is King Ghidorah's last stand against Godzilla, to sometimes being slow as is Baragon losing his grip and falling before crashing, like he's on the moon. Kaiju are supposed to move slow for that sense of scale quote unquote, but this is just too slow. I strongly recommend watching the original Japanese version of GMK, or any Godzilla movie for that matter, because TriStar sucks at dubbing. They're worse than 4Kids, and dare I say Funimation. Unless you watch the original version, you'll lose your suspension of disbelief by the opening title sequence, because TriStar screwed it up. GMK is often hailed for having the greatest opening to a Godzilla film to date, but it's covered mostly by a rather large slightly transparent grey box which has the English title superimposed on top of it. What retarded TriStar thought that was a good idea? Other than that, GMK is a movie that's good enough to be timeless. I don't think GMK will ever be displaced as one of if not the greatest Godzilla movies of all time. However, when it comes to the greatest movie of the Millennium era, it's not a hard choice. The best Millennium Godzilla movie by a long shot, the best Godzilla movie so far this century and millennia, and the best Americanized movie in this long-running franchise is Godzilla 2000. Among the reasons why is because it brought Godzilla out of a second hiatus, but more so for giving TriStar a chance to redeem itself with its English release in response to the negative reception 98 received. Another reason Godzilla 2000 is the best Godzilla movie this century is its cast of characters. The cast is less bloated than Shin Godzilla and Final Wars' cast, and while they're simplistic in characterization, they aren't gay. Yuji Shinoda is the founder of GPN, Godzilla Prediction Network. His mission is following Godzilla like storm chasers, study his properties, and predict where he will show up, if humanity and Godzilla are going to live in the same world. Shinoda doesn't work alone, he works with his daughter Io. Obviously something must have happened to his wife, but while we don't know what happened, we do see him and Io working well together, much like Joel and Ellie in The Last of Us. Shinoda's idea on keeping Godzilla alive puts him at odds with Katagiri. In the movie, he knows Katagiri authorized the controlled demolition of the tower with him inside it, but he still tries to get him to move before Godzilla kills him. At the end, Shinoda gives the most introspective line in all of Godzilla as a franchise. When asked why does Godzilla keep helping out humanity after all the times they tried to destroy him, maybe it's because Godzilla is inside each one of us. Some would say Shinoda is an improvement over Miki Saigusa, like he actually has reasons for why he wants Godzilla alive, but if that's true, then he would be a massive faggot. For one so young, Io does a lot to help out her dad. She can handle GPN's equipment, manage finances and recruitment, and cooking for herself and her dad. What keeps her from being a Mary Sue like Kyoko is her insecurity in being a kid who needs her father. The best comparison would be Artemis Fowl, a sinister boy genius who kidnaps a fairy, holds her hostage for gold, and outwits the fairy police, all to help his narcoleptic mother. The novel is great, but the movie sucks. The badass Russian butler was blackwashed. Anyways, Yuki Ichinos works as a photographer for a local Tokyo newspaper, much like Peter Parker does in Spider-Man.
You serious?
She hangs around with the Shinodas, so she can take good money shots at Godzilla. They put up with her being cynical, EO even hilariously calling her an imbecile. But eventually Yuki grows to liking them to the point she can be EO's surrogate mother. Shiro Miyazaki, no relation to Hayao Miyazaki, is Shinoda's former colleague. They departed over different views of Godzilla, but regardless of having different opinions, Shiro still cares about Shinoda's well-being like when he came out alive after the tower collapsed. Nothing homosexual. When Shinoda brings in Godzilla skin samples, they both discover his regenerative properties which they call Regenerator G1. They hypothesize it can advance modern medicine. This is essentially what Dr. Yamauchi theorized how Godzilla survived H-bomb tests in the first Godzilla movie, and since 2000 is a direct sequel to 1954 in this continuity, it's rather marvelous to see this idea delved much further. The antagonist Katagiri as director of CCI holds the opposite view of Shinoda, that Godzilla should be killed for Japan's safety, no matter the cost. In being utilitarian, he doesn't care about Shinoda's well-being. By the end, Godzilla walks up to the building where our characters are. He and Katagiri meet eye to eye. Seeing Godzilla so close makes him go crazy and results in the best death of any characters in the Godzilla franchise. Observe. When people mention the Millennium era of Godzilla, Mirai Goji comes to mind as he is the most iconic iteration. While having a small amount of alterations, the template and body shape look more like the original upright Godzilla than TriStar's horizontal design. Up till 2000, we've never seen Godzilla with jagged dorsal fins, and they are the coolest. The sound design for Godzilla is also very cool. Back then, Toho knew that to make a new iteration of Godzilla memorable, he needed a new set of roars. Even Legendary understood this. But now Toho has seemingly forgotten this as the Reiwa iterations of Godzilla keep recycling Showa sound effects, which is another reason they suck. It is not hard to make a variety of sounds with a double bass and a glove coated in resin. While I do like Mirai Goji's look in the movie, I like Yuji Sekai's sculpt better. The movie's look is more crocodilian, while the sculpt has more noticeable fangs and ears. Godzilla's atomic breath has traditionally been blue, so to be more noticeable, Mirai Goji's breath is orange, and is complemented by his dorsal fins being purple. Like Monster X in Final Wars, Orga's debut in 2000 was very memorable. He is a really interesting creature, an accumulation of Millennium alien biomass having absorbed Godzilla's regenerative properties. It however mutates him into his final form. Everyone says it was a conscious decision by the monster modelers to model Orga's head after the TriStar Godzilla, so that audiences could see the Japanese Godzilla defeat the American Godzilla quote unquote, but that's not what I see. Orga looks more like the Rancor from Return of the Jedi, the difference being of course he has a hole in his shoulder. As a character, having tasted Godzilla's regenerative properties, Orga wants to suck Godzilla dry and become a full Godzilla clone, and he'll put up a good fight to do it. The Atari games have him be a formidable fighter. Much like the Millennium's UFO that dropped him off, he can fire a cannon beam from his shoulder. His most bizarre ability is extending his mouth open wide, and this proves to be his downfall as he was born yesterday, despite wanting to fight Godzilla. He had no idea Godzilla would do a nuclear pulse inside him. Thankfully vor fetishists haven't made Orga into a vor icon, like they did with Cell. Can you imagine Orga swallowing anime girls or even Gajanka girls? Gross. There exists two cuts of the movie. Both contain the same story, but the Japanese version is described as being inferior to the TriStar version. In the Japanese cut, the soundtrack was all by Takeuchi Hattori and some of his cues were overused and aren't very that dramatic. The TriStar cut has additional scores done by J. Peter Robinson and they are rather fitting to the scenes they play in. Godzilla and Orga's sound effects were lackluster in the Japanese cut. Godzilla sounded like horse breathing at times, and Orga's sound effects were Cretaceous King Ghidorah from Rebirth of Mothra 3. Just lazy. On the other side of the Pacific, TriStar's cuts spiced up their sound effects with variety. Godzilla didn't have those horse breathing sounds and actually had some of Zilla's sounds, and Auger's sound effects were actually the TriStar sound designer's daughter named Natalia Adams. She must have been like 7 years old at the time. Now that's creative. To close out Godzilla 2000, I say if you're watching it, stick around to the end. It's incredible. After Shinoda says the last line, Godzilla sets the city on fire to Akira Ifukube's music, and the credits roll as Godzilla stands in the flames and the march theme plays. Thank you Akira Ifukube, and thank you very much TriStar for actually using his music. So to summarize my main points as quickly and neatly as possible, I think half of the Millennium Godzilla movies suck, while half of them don't. Final Wars' story and characters are retarded, its world building is as broken as the anime trilogy, the music is neat, but the final product pisses all over 50 years of Godzilla and kaiju content. Versus MegaGearS doesn't understand basic space stuff, while its female protagonist and kaiju antagonist are unlikable and potential sex offenders. Tokyo SOS screws up its predecessor's set lore and continuity. Against Mechagodzilla has a huge plot hole that can't be ignored, but it has the best character work in any Godzilla movie. GMK has a good story in Monster Mayhem, and has a lot of great ideas, even though it didn't live up to its fullest potential. And while Godzilla 2000's story, characters, world building, and themes are simplistic, they are done right, and TriStar's release improves upon the Japanese version in terms of filmmaking, and pays respect to the franchise that gave them the opportunity.
But Godzilla 98 is my favorite Godzilla movie. It respected Godzilla.
Sigh. This was a long one, but that's all for now until next time. Now I'm in the mood for American dill pickles. Good night.
And all this time we've been pretending, well, I've been believing that any day our dreams will come true. Our dreams will come true.
Now that's an American dill.
In the Japanese animation world, the shows are analyzed by two separate yet equally retarded groups of people. Those who like making videos about stuff, but don't want to focus on making content. It's hobby for them. They don't have any social media, so they must be contacted through other means. And those who tend to live and die in their golden age, leaving behind their lists and blogs, as if time suddenly stood still, their scribblings once filled with such joy and passion now mere archives for the future generations of warbling young otaku to laugh at and build on, haunting unfortunate souls with their long dead anime takes. This is the latter. Mine from a bygone era.
Last time on Anime Animators Perceptions Objectives Codex, or AAPOC, we learned from the secret life of the otaku, and the melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, how otakus come to terms with themselves and the real world, all while forming a sense of identification. But we're still not done. During the deluge of girls with guns, men did not apply when they were told to within, and as a result, we have Noir, aka, What's Wrong with Japanese Animation, but not much else. I started out intending to write a review of the American Yuri motion picture, Bound, but while researching, I'll admit using Wikipedia, I discovered it's a neo-noir much like the Yuri anime, Noir, by the B-Train studio in Japan. I thought, great, I can do one big girls with guns review, but when I started watching Noir, I knew that it deserved its own review. Unfortunately, the show needed its own review because of what it did wrong, not what it did right. We at AAPOC must return to the basics, to really define the lessons learned from books and games. Let's begin. Young women with gun skills? Check. The problem is it doesn't go anywhere with that. Bound was slow in an artistic way, but Noir is slow with delivery. Mysterious organization that runs the world? Check. The mobsters were Italians that were kind of sort of founded off of Tony Soprano, and whether or not it's real is up for interpretation, but in Noir, nope, up front the soldats are real. Can you say Team Rocket? Quasi-religious mysticism? Check. Sure, there's not a lot of meaning in Bound, but again it was artistic enough to hold itself, and I feel like you could put something there. Hot steamy lesbian love? Check. I feel like it could be a comment on same-sex love and the obsessiveness it brings, but in Noir, nope, they just don't commit, it's not the central focus, which is bad. Bound only lasted one theatrical run, but if you started watching Noir and thought it was Bound, the anime series, I wouldn't blame you. Noir isn't a complete copy of Bound, it does tread new ground after about 20 episodes or so. And the new material is innovative in its own way. The biggest problem with this show is its pacing. Episodes drag on and on while little of interest happens. In my opinion, it is acceptable for the creator of an action show to slow down the pace of the show in order to allow for character development. What ultimately holds it back, what has held many other shows back over time, is that it still feels too much like a rehash of what came before, rather than something fresh and entertaining. The easiest way to see why it's a rehash is to look at the main characters of each showing and to see how similar they are. As an Indian professor once said,
to begin with, the plots of the stories are the same.
Corky and Muriel are both experienced and professional at their jobs. Both are the masculine to the feminine of each showing's canon shipping. Both are mildly dissatisfied with the lives they live until they meet their love interest. Meanwhile, Violet and Kirika are both young and old, short and tall, slender and plump girls with mysterious and tragic pasts. Both girls appear fragile and absent-minded, but actually have great power of their own. But there's still something of the chameleon about Violet. The personalities of these pairs of characters are so similar that Japan could have taken Bound's characters, put them into Noir, and Noir would have played the same. Man, imagine Corky pulling Violet up from a lava pit. The similarity suggests that Japan's goal with Noir was to repeat the formula that made Bound successful. The problem with this approach is that it leads to a boring show. If you've seen Bound, the first two-thirds of Noir will seem like a pale imitation. And by the time the show finds a new direction, it's almost over. The upshot to Japan's approach is that it probably led a number of Bound fans to watch Noir in the first place. It certainly led me to watch it instead of a show like Phantom, Requiem for the Phantom of the Opera. For example, Japanese anime series like Black Lagoon, Its Creature, and Darker Than Black, much like Noir, have done a great replicating job of creating compelling characters who are motivated by a range of emotions. I've even seen Black Lagoon compared to Berserk, which to me is the highest praise one can lord upon an anime series. The Rock, the main character in Black Lagoon, is a mid-20s guy pulled into a different world and is much like a rehash of the main character in Phantom. He gets kidnapped by the mercenary/pirate crew of the Creature from the Black Lagoon. After his company abandons him, The Rock ditches his old life and joins his captors. The Rock is the main character of the show but often shares the spotlight with the group's enforcer, the Reveille. The Reveille is a two-handed gunslinger who can rely on her fists if necessary. She's a rehash of the Faye Valentine crossed with a G.I. Jane, the Greater One. The crew is rounded out by a hacker named the Benny, a rehash of the Badges, and the ship's captain the Dutch, who is darker than black much like Noir. The Rock grows during Black Lagoon, as does the Creature from the Black Lagoon, from a spineless salaryman into an assertive outlaw. Meanwhile, in Phantom, we learn the main character is driven by vengeance, and that he cares for his partner, but overall he seems flat and unrealistic. The main character's lack of emotion ultimately makes it hard to care what happens to him. Much like Violet and Kirika. The busyness strategy of trying to recreate a proven success happens with America all the time as well. For example, Twilight did well, so now there are 3 different shows about vampires on TV. They're all good anyway since Twilight sucks. Good examples of successful rehashes are West Side Story, Romeo plus Juliet, and Romeo times Juliet. The plots are rehashed from Romeo and Juliet, and are the same, yet the characters and the action are still fresh. The Shakespearean play was a tragedy that earned a sad ending, but Romeo times Julia the anime, perhaps without realizing it, had become an inspiring drama that just defaulted to a sad ending because, well, that's what the play did, and as a result it didn't feel true. This is as true for those who know William Shakespeare personally as it is for those that have never met the guy. I loved Noir and likely will review it here soon. It was the best Girls with Guns show I've seen, but what it failed to do was take the idea behind Bound, Girls with Guns with lesbianic undertones, and create a compelling new story around it. In my opinion. To quote Miyazaki-sama, Japan's mistake is repeated by much of the industry. The anime studios are busy copying old shows instead of transforming their ideas into new red shoes. Luckily, the US TV network Starz is releasing a live-action adaptation of Noir soon. It will be a good chance to see if Hollywood can succeed where Japan failed, in my opinion. Next episode of Anime Animators Perceptions Objectives Codex, we shall be talking about anime distributors hating women. How many Bandai lawyers does it take to know something Netflix doesn't, and perhaps a part of me that wants to see more. Men, please apply within.
My Godzilla, that did not age well. Even by my standards, that was retarded. Men apply within is obviously someone who's questioning his homosexuality. How anyone can take that seriously is beyond me, but then I remember I live in a world where Violet Evergarden is lauded as the best looking anime there is, and to be honest it doesn't deserve that praise. And as I wrap this up, I want to take a moment to say something. Beiterine Goji, I know you're watching, or at least I hope you are. You asked if this take on Noir was real back in the day. Well, almost all the choice of words are real quotes from actual people. And you know what, that's fair. I have met many during my time on YouTube, but out of all of them, you are one of the few who seems to get it. Not many people do. We can agree that the Godzilla anime trilogy and Singular Point suck. They certainly fall short on their own, and compared to classic anime. We can also agree that Sandman's retrospect on V-Train's Girls with Guns trilogy sucks. He waxed fancy on Noir and El Cazador for superfluous reasons, but he didn't even try to assess Mad Lax's characters and story properly. And if he thinks the characters talk to themselves too much for a premise so simple to understand, then he clearly hasn't seen Godzilla Singular Point. I don't think his pea-brain would have comprehended it, even if he watched it, just for the kaiju. We most certainly agree that Birdie Wing is better than Godzilla Singular Point. Yosuke Kuroda is a better writer than Toenjo, drunk or not. Still, don't at me. And you seem to be holding your own on Twitter, and that brings this to the end. And that is the secret to why UG will always jump higher than Mario, no matter what any shareholder says on Shark Tank. She's a lady! What? Hello gamers and people of YouTube. This video is going to be a short one. In this video, I will explain the top 5 reasons the upcoming Godzilla MonsterVerse Apple TV Plus show will suck. I have not seen the show yet, no one has. The title of this video probably gave some of you a heart attack, and that's not such a bad thing, but there are 5 reasons that convince me that it'll be a bad show.
I hate you so much because you do nothing except ruin the fun. You suck and I hate you. You are the worst YouTuber ever existed.
But if the show turns out to be good, then I will readily admit that this video aged poorly and will take the L. Number 5, it will be an Apple TV Plus exclusive. So why is this a problem? As if getting an HBO Max subscription to watch Godzilla vs. Kong was bad enough, now I would have to buy an Apple TV Plus subscription just for this show. Likewise, I had to get a Nintendo GameCube, an Xbox, a Wii, and a PlayStation console, just to play a specific Godzilla game for that console. I'm going to use it once and move on to something else. It's just going to sit there gathering dust unless I'm feeling nostalgic for those games, like a lot of nostalgia. But after I get my fill of that nostalgia, while my appreciation for the game is still there very much, so when I do get my fill, I move on to something else. Obviously Warner Brothers is participating in the so-called streaming wars with Paramount, Hulu, Disney, and Amazon, so they put each property of theirs on exclusive streaming services just to earn more bucks, but at least the Godzilla show isn't going to be on Netflix, or should I call it Nonsflix, because they are shamelessly still streaming cuties, after everyone and their grandmother explained the problem. Disgusting. Disgusting! The Kong Skull Island anime is going to be on Netflix unfortunately, as well as other shows people are interested in, so happy pirating I suppose. Also, Macintosh is worse than PC. Number 4, Screen Time Calibration. Since this is going to be like the 5th Godzilla TV series, now we have to calibrate measuring the amount of screen time Godzilla gets in each episode of each show, like we have done with the movies. This means that someone is going to have to sit through every episode of the Hanna-Barbera cartoon, Godziland, Godzilla the series, and Singular Point with a stopwatch and catalog each episode's screen time for Godzilla and chart it. I'm not even going to do it myself. I'll let some artist like Joker Cluster do it for me, if he's not dead of course. He'll probably find that the filler monsters have more on-screen presence, yet Singular Point is obviously the worst offender so far. It spent a lot of time setting up May as well as Yoon, but then contradicted them. And by the time Godzilla showed up smashing Tokyo, rising from the seas, and evolving into his ultimate form, he didn't have much character at all. This creates something as bland and forgettable as some of the kaiju from Pacific Rim. Thanks for making this harder than you've already made it, legendary. Number 3, the showrunners Chris Black and Matt Fraction. This one's a bit iffy since we are so early in production, but as of now, we have 2 people in charge of the project as compared to the half a dozen plus one that were on all 4 movies. Through my detective work on these showrunners, here's what I found. Chris Black looks too old. Most of his work is with television as his only theatrical work was Masterminds starring Patrick Star Stewart. And his Wikipedia page is a stub. He is a nobody. Looking at Matt Fraction's Wikipedia page, he is more of a comic book writer than a TV show writer. The MonsterVerse movies have a pattern of hiring directors when their resumes are not very big or haven't been that great, as opposed to experienced directors like J.J. Abrams, Guillermo del Toro, Steven Spielberg, James Wan, Peter Jackson, or even Tim Burton. Giving the role of showrunner to 2 unknowns is going to end up disastrous. They both can be the future D&D. Number 2, where in the world is Godzilla? No seriously, where on earth is Godzilla between the events of 2014 and King of the Monsters? The show is going to take place between those 2 movies, and during that time, Godzilla hasn't been seen by the public. He could be recharging in the Hollow Earth from his bout with the Mutus, or hiding in a sea basin. Now, Legendary has made expanded universe content for the MonsterVerse, but its canonicity is debatable, and it can easily be retconned in oblivion, like this needed with the Star Wars EU. There are goofs such as mistaking docile buffaloes for strangling vines, and Godzilla's page time is so brief that it will make you appreciate his screen time in the movies. Multimedia tie-ins can either allow superfans to further immerse themselves in their favorite worlds, or they can act as retroactive corrections to poor storytelling in the source material. They can also suck, like having boats 250 million years ago. In the case of Aftershock, Godzilla battles another Muto, while Emma Russell descends into lesbianity, but it also shows how Godzilla gets new dorsal fins in King of the Monsters, which some squirrels on Twitter apparently have an issue with. Needless to say, consistency is a risk. Well, it was already chucked out the window back in 2017 when Kong Skull Island crystallized the MonsterVerse from the gourmet 2014 quote-unquote to the cinematic fast food that is its prequel and sequels, and it has since become a rampant gaseous disease spreading into everything. And the number 1 reason this show will suck. Family Gay. I probably could have made this video 3 minutes with just this reason alone, because this reason encompasses everything talked about previously. According to sources, the show will cover one family's journey to uncover its buried secrets and a legacy linking them to the secret organization known as Monarch. Quote unquote. Every MonsterVerse movie so far has a human family unit. How most people haven't picked up on this pattern is a mystery. It might be off by a detail or two, but I'm sure I can still tell you what's going to happen. The Godzilla fan base will eat it up because it's Godzilla, but the LGBT community will try to cultivate conversations about identity politics and social justice around it. There will be gatekeeping, like which the world has never seen. To illustrate what I mean, allow me to quote a local tranny. The show just might center
itself around yet another largely hapless and, again, white suburban middle-class family who believes they can understand the monsters and their purpose better than a multitude of professionals around them with more knowledge and experience than they'd ever dreamed.
Written by Amidasha Perrin, her pronouns are they/z. As in Zephyr. And there you have it. 5 reasons this show will suck. Again, I can be wrong, and will readily admit that, if the show's actually good. Until then, good night.
What's up guys, good Sheriff at 4 here, also known as Richard Manzo, and today we're going to be talking about the Justice League. DC has also been stressing though how this is going to be a much lighter and brighter tone than Batman v Superman. I guess because it will put a lot of people off. Zack Snyder was talking about it, but yeah, it's pretty cool. Zack Snyder also talked about Superman though in his appearance in the film. He said if he does appear, it's going to affect the story big time, it'll be something big.
And that calls for a re-examination of Man of Steel.
Man of Steel's criticisms range from superficial to legitimate to factually incorrect, and we've observed that most of the people who hate the film are basing their opinions on the latter. What we want to do is show you the most common criticisms, subjective or not, and then respond to them through creator commentary, comic book history, clips from the movie, and common sense so that you can ask yourself whether you're objectively wrong about your own opinion. And if so, maybe you can enjoy the film with newfound appreciation.
What? You thought I only made essays about Godzilla and animus in video form? Hell no. In light of the discourse sprouting from Zack Snyder's 4-hour cut of Justice League, I think it makes sense to take a look back at Man of Steel where it all began, since the film itself divided a hell of a lot of people when it released, and now, especially with the other films in the DCEU, the quality has been brought into question. Similarly to other franchises once time passes. Now, Man of Steel is not my favorite film of all time, but I don't have to be a DC fan to put aside my biases and face the truth. Man of Steel is a bad movie. There, I said it. I just kicked the beehive, but I'll be liking Theoden as he rides out of Helm's Deep against so many trolls. Yes, I know David Goyer wrote the film, but I see Snyder's fingerprints all over it, just as I see Gareth Edwards all over Godzilla 2014, not simply Max Borenstein. Oh hey, Goyer and Borenstein sound Jewish. So join me on this adventure as I rip Zack Snyder to shreds for creating the most retarded movie I have ever seen. I remember seeing Man of Steel back in 2013. I didn't love it, nor do I have any sort of passion for anything DC Comics related. The only DC content I remember watching on Cartoon Network in the afternoon, and on Toonami at night, was Batman the Animated Series, Justice League, and Teen Titans. Teen Titans Go is gay. It was fan-serviceable at first, but then it sank so low in that episode with Blackfire and Robin twerking, and made me want to vomit. Plus their crossover with Thundercats Raw was despicable. How Teen Titans Go to the movies was well received I will never know. Well, I digress. There are some things about Man of Steel that I do like. A cool soundtrack by Hans Zimmer, several stellar visuals and cinematography, the idea of a god becoming human, Henry Cavill as Superman. No homo. Fat ginger boy whose name is Peter Ross played by Jack Farley and Joseph Cranford going from bully to friend. Aunt Jatro as Fora. Feora, you know what, I don't think they pronounced her name enough in the film for me to remember it. Anyway, she is a formidable fighter who I would call a Kryptonian lesbian. I like to think that she and Wonder Woman should have fought. They certainly did in the comics. Despite all these biases though, looking back almost a decade later, I have happily come to accept the reality that Man of Steel is overall a bad film. Both as a standalone movie and the Kickstarter for the DCEU. 2 reasons, one being its pacing obviously, but the one thing holding it down is one man, and it's not Henry Cavill or the character he plays. Superman in this film is only a pawn in an edge man's game to tear down his status as an American folk hero. Zack Snyder.
Is it not Ford-worthy?
Zack's style of directing seems to stem from DC Comics missing the point of Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. 2008's The Dark Knight was looked at as the peak, the pinnacle, one of the best films ever made, if not the best. DC Comics looked at the success of The Dark Knight and thought the reason it was successful can be summed up in 3 words: dark gritty realism. The idea that being dark and somber automatically means good quality. So, when directing Man of Steel, Zack remade Superman to be like Christopher Nolan's Batman, which then spilled over into the other DCEU films. But dark gritty realism doesn't work with Superman, because he and Batman are different in portrayal and values. Superman can fight any time of the day, he usually fights during the day, he has great power, but he's not all powerful, he can't stop a heart attack. He shows mercy to enemies, and has a strong sense of law and morality. Batman fights crime during the night, hence his name The Dark Knight. He is a detective and a strategist, a moral grey vigilante that intimidates, and can go too far, like in some iterations he almost killed his parents' murderer and the Joker. Not to mention, being edgy doesn't make your story good. It makes you look desperate for attention. You will notice this pattern throughout the movie as you see pretentious religious imagery, skulls everywhere, and most offensively the collateral damage and body counts on Superman.
Oh sure, when Godzilla destroys half the city and kills the unstoppable threat to save the world, everyone cheers. But when I do it, everyone gets all grouchy and judgmental. I see how it is. Hey, way to go, Godzilla. You killed those awful creatures that only wanted to breed. You know who else wanted to procreate at the expense of humanity? Zod. That's right. You're welcome.
I still blame Superman for this.
Anyway, let's look into Man of Steel's story. But first, today's sponsor, Nationwide Mutual Insurance. Just ask these 2 sodomites.
So with a nationwide annuity, you can get protected monthly income for the rest of your life.
That's what I'm talking about. How about those song lyrics?
What song lyrics?
Tell them again. Tell them again. Repeat it. Yeah, same thing.
So with a nationwide annuity, you can get protected monthly.
The story is told through non-linear narrative, much like This Is Us. Or in relation to Christopher Nolan, the Out of Order story, that got critical acclaim with Momentous, so Nolan's been trying to use it with every film he's been attached to. So here's the story linearly, and why certain plot points and character developments are retarded. Once upon a time, an alien race called Kryptonians ventured out into space and colonized other planets with their advanced technology for 100,000 years. Sounds cool so far? It's really interesting. In the beginning of Man of Steel, however, all Kryptonians, except for the ones on Krypton, have seemingly died out. This is retarded, because if you have the technology to explore other worlds and terraform them to make them more habitable, and you've been doing it for 100,000 years, your race is astronomically unlikely to go extinct. You would essentially have infinite energy, farming, medicine, knowledge, etc. a Kryptonian scientist named Jor-El pleads to the High Council of Krypton that the planet is going to self-destruct due to harvesting its core for energy. He even mentions outposts on other inhabitable planets to escape to. The council refuses to evacuate Krypton because it's their home planet, like a bunch of assholes.
It's like a bunch of assholes.
This is also retarded because how can a scientifically advanced civilization that can travel to and terraform other worlds not know the ramifications of mining a planet's core? Modern mining has come a long way since the days of canaries in coal mines, and even then we know better than to mine the Earth's core. And just now they're being warned. Where have the other scientists been? Were they paid off? Plus, the outposts on other worlds dying out is akin to the 13 colonies in North America dying out for not sustaining themselves, which is historically impossible. North America was called the New World for its resources, which is why Britain, France and Spain colonized it. At the same time Jor-El is fleeing, a coup led by Zod happens, and assaults the High Council. Zod is then captured and banished to the Shadow Realm. Yes, I know it's called the Phantom Zone, but we are going to stick with the Shadow Realm. It's Ugilicious. Then Krypton blows up, but Jor-El's son escapes to Earth just before that happens. On Earth, Kal-El Clark Kent grows up while getting used to his superpowers due to Earth being different than Krypton. Clark saves a bus full of kids, but as opposed to being congratulated for using his powers for good, his Earth father John chides him for it. Then John dies in a tornado because he wanted to. Clark then travels the world. Keep all this in mind, these retardations will come back later. Thanks to overhearing a conversation at a local diner, Clark finds a Kryptonian ship in the Arctic that belonged to his dead sister. And with the guidance of the AI of Jor-El, he becomes Superman and takes flight. This is a cool scene despite the retardedness leading to it. Meanwhile, Zod and his minions escape the Shadow Realm and head to Earth. They demand Kal-El be brought to them, so they can restart the Kryptonian race and terraform Earth because to them, Earth is barely habitable. Despite the fact that Zod can adapt to Earth and gain superpowers much faster than Clark did when he was a kid. This is retarded. Lots and lots of collateral damage and carnage later, Superman defeats Zod. Clark is accepted on planet Earth. Written by a hack. What a catastrophe in storytelling. There is no consistency in fictional rules, good luck for some, bad luck for others, coincidence, convenience, all leading to the payoffs. No basis in reality. A distinct lack of cause and effect. How David Boyer go from The Dark Knight to Man of Steel is beyond me. Oh wait, he wrote The Dark Knight Rises. That makes as much sense as readjusting a broken back. Not only does the story of Man of Steel suck, the characters suck too. Starting with these two Kryptonian defecations, we have Jor-El, by Russell Crowe. He is the coolest character in the movie. He rides a dog dragon thing. On one hand, he's just now warning Krypton of its impending self-destruction. If Jor-El is this retarded, then how in the hell is he a scientist? On the other, he suggests evacuating to other worlds, which isn't retarded at all. I'm all for that. For the rest of his on-screen presence, Jor-El lives on as an AI, but is then deleted. Arguably better utilized than Bryan Cranston in Godzilla 2014, but at least Cranston wasn't periodically retarded. Zod, played by Michael Shannon, sounds like he stuffed a bag full of marshmallows in his mouth before talking.
Heresy! Destroy it!
He is calm and collected, only to snap like a rabid dog.
I will find him! I will find him! I will find him!
As a character, he wants to restart his race, but he is portrayed as the villain that can work in storytelling and make a compelling anti-villain, a Kryptonian supremacist, but Zod is written to be retarded. He persists with terraforming Earth, even after adapting to its atmosphere. If he and Superman can do it, so can any other Kryptonian. The Kryptonian babies can grow up and get used to Earth, just as easy as human baby boys get used to being circumcised. They won't remember it. As a meme, his lines are unironically hilarious. His best line is, "Where did you train?" On a farm.
On a farm?
Lara, played by Eilert Shora, is Superman's biological mother, but that fact alone raises the question that makes the story fall apart. What have Kryptonian women been doing for centuries other than wanting to be mothers? Whether or not parenthood is pre-programmed in our brains or DNA of whatever, there has to be at least one woman who wants to mother children, which again makes this story fall apart. She dies, but does nothing in the face of Krypton's destruction, much like Lot's wife just stood there and looked at Sodom getting nuked and was caught in the blast and is now salt. Come to think of it, why didn't she suggest Jor-El create a pod for him, her and Kal-El?
Don't know.
John Kent, played by Kevin Costner, is the worst parent in the DCEU and is worse than most anime parents. He's Clark Kent's Earth father who doesn't want him to be discovered for no reason. The world is not ready for him, he says, but it's actually the opposite. Clark isn't ready for the world, he needed someone to install in him moral standards. John's reasoning is stupid, and he would let a bus full of kids die to keep Clark secret.
Just let him die.
Maybe. Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Many people will say, well, that's just typical, that's almost annoyingly bad, that it's just every boy destiny monologue we've heard before, but it's something. He is also aware of Clark's alien background, even ponders the potential it would have on the possibility of extraterrestrial life as we know it, but he wants him to be a farmer? A justified way to chide Clark would be if he abused his powers, but the story wasn't written to have that happen on purpose. In his retardedness, he does nothing when there's a tornado behind him. Ignoring the fact that that's not how tornadoes work, or hiding under an underpass during one is stupid. Every seems to take death like a light breeze in this film. Seems suicidal. We then get to look at more women. Lois Lane, played by Amy Adams, is at least leading actress and journalist hot. At first she comes off as an interesting, feisty, funny, opinionated character who doesn't take dick measuring shit, but somewhere in the creative process, her character's zapped by the Nolan Ray quote unquote. She has the hots for Superman who she barely knows on a personal level, to the point they kiss surrounded by millions of casualties and carnage. Lois plays a major role in the story, yet she becomes retarded during the finale. All she has to do is push a button, but alas she doesn't.
It's supposed to go in all the way!
On top of that, her plot armor makes her physically anomalous, in that she falls out of a plane, while everything else is sucked into a black hole. Mike Tyson would tell you that black holes don't discriminate. Now where does the evidence for Aunt Jatro's character being a lesbian come from? In the movie, she requests Lois to accompany her by order of Zod, but Zod does nothing with Lois at all. He only wanted Superman brought to him. It can't be for leverage or a bargaining chip. She exposed him worldwide, which is how Zod found him, but he doesn't thank her. Interrogation? Wasn't on screen, didn't happen.
Why does Zod bring Lois onto his ship? There is no reason for her to be there.
Plot-wise it was done so Lois can plug in the USB to meet Jor-El's AI ghost who helps them escape. But character-wise, Aunt Jatro's character had been in solitary confinement in the Shadow Realm for who knows how long, and she has Lois locked in a room on a ship. Perhaps for special time together later? When battling Superman at an IHOP, she explains that morality is disadvantageous on an evolutionary scale. Since lesbianism is considered immoral in moral societies for not being sexually productive, perhaps it developed out of a need for social mobility? Probably. Bill Nye once tried to explain sexuality with ice cream flavors, but it turned out he was just being retarded. Other than all that, she's got other characteristics. She's bred for battle and it shows, fisticuffs and knife protection, and she goes out in a badass way. And the worst of all, Superman. Since 2013, people say Henry Cavill is their Superman, but he deserved better. Man of Steel was supposed to be the first in a trilogy of films. This is also Clark's first time as a superhero, but with a variety of power sets. Him being a rookie would have made an interesting story in him experimenting with his powers, But what happened in the film wasn't a result of his inexperience, but his carelessness. In the Smallville fight, he flew Zod through a gas station and blew up cars at the pump. There could have been people in them. The fact that he even brought Zod into Smallville put everybody in the town in imminent danger. And that's not counting punching a minion into a train yard as opposed to punching them into space. The same minion throwing a train back, and it crashes into an appliance store, and so many buildings coming down thanks to him lasering Zod's ship at the end. He lets a lot of people die by collateral damage which he could have prevented, had he not become retarded. There are even moments in the film where he doesn't use his laser eye beams when it would have helped him. Clark's thematic through line seems to be free will versus destiny. Nurturing versus nature. There's assigning a role, and then there's offering a role. Both Jor-El and John Kent tell him that he's free to decide what to do with his life, but they insist that he be the bridge between two worlds. And the theme is utterly shattered when he says Krypton had its chance. Comic book fans suppose that there's a lot of deep-rooted philosophy they've been trying to dig up with DC characters over the years. That philosophy haven't necessarily made it into the films during Tim Burton's Batman or the Dark Knight trilogy, but then so Zack Snyder went all the way with his blatant imagery to make Superman look like a messianic figure. Particularly Jesus of the Christian faith. The similarities are as followed. Both Jesus and Clark were of 33 years when they gave themselves up. There are gobs of imagery such as the crucifix T-pose. Even a YouTuber named Couch Tomato called it when he compared the Roman Catholic biased film Passion of the Christ to Man of Steel and found 24 similarities. On an archetypical scale, Superman is supposed to be an allegory for Moses. They were sent away as a baby to avoid destruction and they were raised by other parents, like Goku. Moses may be looked at as a messianic figure, but he had anger management issues like killing an Egyptian whippersnapper and beating a rock with a stick for water a second time when he only had to do it once. Also, nobody in their right mind watches Prince of Egypt and then reads Exodus and is like, hey, where's the verse that says Moses and Ramesses' chariot raced? Superman's supposed to be the bridge between two worlds, quote unquote. That means he should prioritize preserving life, whether it's human or Kryptonian, but alas he genocides the rest of his people by killing so many Kryptonian babies. In fact, wait a minute, Superman heartlessly committing mass infanticide to preserve his home planet, quote unquote. That's Pharaoh. Oh my Godzilla. Zack Snyder got inspiration from the antagonist of Moses' story. When Moses is supposed to be Superman's inspiration.
That's kind of the point of the scene.
Lastly, he retardedly kills Zod by snapping his neck. This scene is stupid for 3 reasons. 1. He's an idiot. He could have put Zod in a choke hold that would have cut off oxygen to his brain. 2. The people he saves are idiots. They could have ducked under Zod's eye beams or ran around them. And 3. Zod's an idiot. He can move his eyes and that's assuming the beams come out of the pupils and not the eye sockets. Kratos did it better.
Boy!
If this is not character assassination, then I don't know what is. And in relation to the DCEU. Where were these guys? Whether or not everything was mapped out in Zack's head, am I supposed to think that these cosplaying chucklers would let millions of people die by doing nothing about it? My word, the DCEU sucks. So, the writing is awful. Now let's look into the production of Man of Steel. Like I said earlier, there are several stellar visuals and cinematography. But some creative choices make me want to question Zack Snyder's intentions, or rather his vision, quote unquote. For instance, Zack, what is with all the snap zooms? I hate to say this, but Michael Dougherty did it better by doing it sparingly, that Mexican looking Nazi. Zack, what is with this space blue color grading? Red and blue are supposed to contrast each other. I don't think you could have made this scene any more depressing to look at. Zack, what is with all this product placement in this one scene? Just because advertisements exist in the real world, that doesn't mean putting them in your movie makes it more realistic.
So if you don't like product placement, then I guess you just don't like what Superman stands for.
Von da an alle höheren Offiziere liquidieren zu lassen, wie Stalin!
Also, what is with all this phallic vaginal imagery?
It's supposed to go in all the way!
Are you trying to prove Disney's agenda to turn children into sexually devious adults by subliminal messaging?
Don't know.
According to 80s nostalgia tartan toy collecting fag retro blasting, Michael D. French, Snyder's fanatical followers consists of vocal and vociferous DC fans who have no problem seeing modern heroes getting trashed. They are utter nihilists. They think a building collapse is an incident of damage. We've seen the strong delusion of Twin Perfect, but when Angry Joe was on Nostalgia Maggot for example.
Those characters seem boring to you because they're not as over the top or single-noted as the comic book ones or the Christopher Reeves versions. It's a new kind of Superman that needs a less cliched character, okay? It needs a tougher and darker outlook because we've seen the other Superman stories already. Those are still there. And by putting in these morally confusing lessons that you call illogical, I see them as challenging. And there's no way to save every single buddy like in previous movies and always get your way. There's just a man struggling between what it means to be human and more than human, and trying to do the right thing. Yet he still manages to rise above it and save us all. This movie is awesome.
Pain. In addition, Snydenoids are pretentious. They want to appear more intellectual and grown up. I wouldn't be surprised if they think Godzilla Singular Point is a good anime. Dumb questions that appear smart they ask consist of, what is art? How should we approach film? How should filmmakers create art? To them, film is a genre, and it can't be art, as long as it's married quote unquote to an industry that cares about making money. Ironic that they're against private establishments spending hundreds of millions to make hundreds of millions, when they agree Superman is a symbol of capitalism. In their contrarian point of view, audiences mistake amusement for art, because they see no beauty in it. You know, the idea that most people are plebs and a select few are patricians. However, with a simple Google search, anything can be art by definition. A haunted house and a roller coaster at an amusement park. Anyone who's played Roller Coaster Tycoon would tell you that. Marvel Sludge and Monkey vs. Lizard films can be art. I'll even admit that all the MonsterVerse movies are better than DCEU movies. That's how far the low has gotten. Even this video is art. I made it. Plus, if a Snydenoid counters that Marvel movies are vanilla, cliché, cut and dry, mediocre, and safe, what stops us applying those generic buzzwords to their DCEU movies? In fact, those buzzwords can apply to their awful video essays. I'm looking at you Colin Sanders, you little shit. Captain America Civil War cannot be considered safe considering what happens in that movie. To Snydenoids, art asks questions. It doesn't give the answer they say.
I am.
Why did you say that name?
And Zack, well. In their minds he created, not just one film, but 3. A work of art to see ourselves in. And Zack Snyder's Justice League is a victory for the fans against the big bad studios. But all he did was cater to the pretentious nihilists and paraded the DC brand while eroding its good fortune. Batman v Superman sucks and Zack Snyder's Justice League is 4-hour trash. And we must burn it to the ground. So yeah, Zack is trash, he is super trash, he is a living bowel movement. Barring 300, his work is overall puerile and under-dramatized, lacking any sense of structure, character and the Aristotelian unities. He is not a man that best functions when going at his own pace. Like any other director, he needs peers, restriction, and a competent editor. But even then, Justice League was garbage. Entertaining, but garbage. I'd even say it's better than Man of Steel. Steppenwolf is the best DCEU villain.
You will love me.
But in the end, does it even matter? Not that I'm referencing Linkin Park and Dragon Ball Z music videos. DC wants to move on from Zack, but the damage is done to the brand. The only thing to do now is look forward to works without Zack like the Suicide Squad. I've heard the character work is pretty good. The end.
And now Willem Dafoe, who's going to be playing a character named Velko, who I guess is a former Atlantean, who now lives on the surface. I don't know, guys. I don't know about that character.
Take up your mother's trident!
Godzilla 2014 is an anime.